I don't believe in ghosts. I never have. I've always been the kind of person who needs proof before I believe anything, especially something supernatural. So when people used to talk about haunted places or weird things happening in schools after hours, I'd usually just brush it off. I tell myself there's always a logical explanation, there's always a reason, but something happened during my final year of high school that I still can't explain. And the worst part is, it didn't just happen once. It happened 3 times, and each time, it got worse. Back then, I used to stay late after school almost every day, not because I liked studying, but because I didn't really have a choice. My house wasn't exactly quiet. I had younger siblings, constant noise, people coming and going. It just wasn't the kind of place where you could sit down and focus. So school became my escape. After 4 p.m., the building would slowly start emptying out. Teachers would leave one by one. Students would head home, and eventually, it would just be a handful of people left. Most days, I'd sit in the library, sometimes in an empty classroom, just doing assignments, listening to music, or sometimes just enjoying the silence. There was one friend of mine, Daniel, who used to stay late too. We'd usually sit together, talk, complain about school, normal stuff. But that week, Daniel was out sick, so for the first time in a while, I was completely alone, and that made the building feel different. Not scary, just empty in a way I hadn't noticed before. The first time it happened was a Tuesday. I remember because I had a math test the next day. I stayed back until around 6:30 p.m. By then, almost all the lights had switched to night mode. Some hallways were dim, some lights flickered slightly. It wasn't unusual. Old buildings do that. I packed my bag and started heading toward the exit. My footsteps echoed louder than usual. Every sound felt amplified. That's when I saw it. Room 214. The lights were on. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe a teacher forgot to turn them off. It happens. But as I got closer, I noticed something else. The door wasn't closed. It was slightly open, just enough for light to spill into the hallway. And for some reason, that made me stop. I walked up to the door slowly. I didn't feel scared. Not yet, just curious. I leaned slightly and looked through the glass window, and that's when I saw them. Students sitting inside. There were about 10, maybe 12, all sitting at their desks, facing forward, and a teacher standing near the board. At first it looked normal, like a late class or something, but then I noticed something that didn't feel right. No one was moving, not even slightly. I stood there, watching, waiting. Normally, even in a quiet classroom, someone shifts in their seat, someone writes, someone looks around. But here, nothing. It was like time had stopped inside that room. I remember focusing on one student in the second row, just staring at them, waiting for them to blink. They didn't. I don't know why I did it, but I pushed the door open. Slowly, the hinge made a long, drawn-out creaking sound, louder than it should have, and the moment it opened, every single head in the room turned toward me at the exact same time, not one after another. Not naturally, perfectly synchronized. That's when I saw their faces clearly, and something inside me just dropped. They looked human, but not completely. Their expressions were wrong, too still, too fixed, like they were trying to mimic what a face should look like. Some of them were smiling, but the smiles didn't reach their eyes. Some weren't smiling at all, just staring. And their eyes, they didn't blink. Then one of them spoke. "Are you late?" The voice didn't come from one person. It came from all of them at the same time. Layered, flat, almost echoing. Their mouths didn't move. The teacher at the front hadn't turned yet. He was still facing the board, but I could hear something, a faint scratching sound, like chalk, even though his hand wasn't moving. Then slowly, he turned, and I swear, his face wasn't there. Just blank, like a smoothed out surface. That's when I ran. I slammed the door and sprinted down the hallway. I didn't look back, not once. The next day, I asked about room 214. My friend looked confused. He said, "That room's been locked for years." I laughed it off, said I must have gotten the number wrong, but something didn't sit right. During lunch, I went back. Room 214 was there, but the door was locked and covered in dust, like it hadn't been opened in a long time. I looked through the window, inside. It was empty. I was about to walk away when I noticed something on the whiteboard, a message written faintly, like it had been there a while. "Why did you leave early?" I never stayed late again after that, but sometimes, when I'm alone, I still hear a classroom door opening behind me. I used to stay after school for theater rehearsals during my junior year, which meant I usually missed the normal buses home. Instead, I had to wait at a public bus stop about 2 blocks away from campus, near an older residential street. Most evenings weren't bad, because a few students waited there too, but one rainy Thursday rehearsal ran much later than expected. By the time I left school, the streets were almost empty. The crossing guard was gone, nearby shops were closing, and it had started drizzling hard enough that people were hurrying indoors. I remember passing the football field and noticing how quiet everything felt once the school doors shut behind me. The bus stop itself sat beside a fenced playground that belonged to an abandoned elementary school. The building had been closed for years because of structural issues, according to one of my teachers. When I reached the stop, I saw someone already sitting on the bench wearing a dark hoodie. Their face wasn't visible because they were leaning forward slightly. I assumed it was another student waiting out the rain. I stood under the shelter checking bus times on my phone, while the person on the bench stayed completely motionless. After maybe 2 minutes, I noticed something strange. Rainwater was hitting the pavement around the bench, but the person's clothes didn't look wet at all, even though part of the hood was outside the shelter. I tried not to stare, because I figured maybe they were just wearing waterproof clothing. A car passed by, and its headlights briefly illuminated the playground fence behind us. For a second, I thought I saw movement inside the abandoned schoolyard, like someone standing near the swings. But when the headlights disappeared, everything blended back into darkness again. I looked toward the person on the bench, expecting them to react too, but they hadn't moved even slightly. Then I heard a quiet voice say, "You're late tonight." The voice sounded low and calm. I assumed they were talking to me, so I replied something about rehearsal running long. They never answered. About 5 minutes passed before I started feeling genuinely uncomfortable. The road had become completely empty, and my bus tracker app suddenly showed a delay with no estimated arrival time. I considered walking home, but it would have taken over an hour. I looked toward the bench again and realized the person was now facing slightly toward me, even though I never saw them move. I still couldn't make out their face beneath the hood because the shelter light flickered constantly. Then I noticed something else. Their shoes looked wrong somehow. Not dirty or damaged, just old-fashioned, like formal black shoes someone much older would wear. Another car drove by slowly, and during the brief headlights, I saw the reflection of the bus shelter glass behind me. The bench appeared empty in the reflection. Completely empty. I turned around immediately, expecting maybe the angle distorted it somehow. But when I looked back directly at the bench, the hooded person was still sitting there. At that point, I honestly considered running back toward school, but before I could decide, the person finally moved. They slowly lifted one arm and pointed toward the abandoned elementary school across the street. I looked automatically, and near the entrance gate, I saw what looked like a child, standing motionless in the rain. Small figure, white shirt, completely still. I looked back toward the bench immediately, but the hooded person was now standing. I never saw them rise from the seat. They were just suddenly upright beside the shelter. The voice spoke again, quieter this time. "Don't look when they wave." I remember every word clearly because seconds later, the small figure near the gate lifted one arm slowly into the air. Before I could react, headlights appeared from down the road behind me. My bus was finally arriving. I stepped toward the curb instinctively, and when I glanced back toward the bench one last time, the hooded person was gone. I got on the bus immediately and sat near the front trying to calm down. The driver noticed I looked shaken and asked if I was okay. I ended up telling him there was a strange person waiting at the stop with me. The driver looked back through the windshield toward the shelter and asked, "What person?" I turned around expecting to see the hooded figure again, but the stop was completely empty except for rain blowing through the shelter. Then the driver said something that made the entire experience worse. He told me he hated stopping there at night because people sometimes reported seeing someone sitting on the bench near the old school. According to him, years earlier, a crossing guard had been killed by a drunk driver outside that same elementary school during heavy rain. Witnesses claimed she'd pushed a child out of the road before being hit herself. He pointed toward the abandoned playground and said the school shut down not long after. I never stayed late for rehearsal again after that night. And even now, whenever I pass a bus shelter in the rain, I still check the reflection before I look directly at the bench.